The day it all began, I was hiding in the laundry, scrolling through my phone in the late Sydney twilight while the television blared in the background, muffled with my parents' laughter. It was my 23rd birthday, and the house was louder than it had been in months. Family from all corners of the city crammed on cheap chairs, warm meat pies and beer and cricket talk filling the air. But I was tucked away, my gut a clenched fist. The post had gone viral, my face was everywhere. Someone, probably Danish from first year who was always quick with a cheap laugh, had clipped one of my grant proposal videos and spliced it with shots of Frankenstein monsters and exploding robots. Local genius thinks he'll cure disease with magic computers, invest now. The video bounced between my stammered, nervous pitch and exaggerated cutaways, my accent, my big hands fidgeting with my old AI lab hoodie strings. The comments scrolled endlessly down the screen. Elmau, who does he think he is? Another Sydney nutter, must be huffing hydrogel fumes. LOL, imagine going broke for this loser. I scrolled and scrolled, heart pounding. My sister Jules, always so much older and sharper, pushed open the laundry door with her shoulder. Her voice was heavy with practiced sympathy. Not still looking at that, are you? I didn't answer, just slid the phone in my pocket. I'd tried explaining my project 100 times, AI-driven peptide modeling for rare disease therapies. Each time I watched their eyes glaze, saw the polite nods. She perched on the washing machine, bare feet dangling above the detergent shelf. You've just got to laugh it off. People online are sheep, mate, but maybe you do talk about this stuff too much. I clenched my jaws. I wanted to snap, to shout that this mattered, that what I was building could save lives, but the words froze somewhere between my chest and throat. She was staring at me, waiting for a reaction. Behind her, the rumble of the family in the kitchen swelled, my Uncle Arjun's booming cackle, Mum's high-pitched scold as my little cousins brandished fistfuls of fairy bread. Come out, Jules said, quieter now. It's your own birthday. At least try to look like you're having fun. I would have preferred the brash laughter to the pity. Still, I forced a smile and followed her, ears burning as I stepped back into the kitchen. Heads turned. Cousin Prashant, always quick with a joke, grinned like he'd seen my every humiliation play out on screen. Oi, viral boy, wish I had your confidence, going all mummy magic on Facebook Live. I could smell sausage rolls and Jasmine Reed diffusers. My mother fussed over stacks of plates. Dad took a familiar sip of his beer, eyes crinkling in the way they did before a lecture. How many followers have you got now? Dad teased, eyebrow lifting. Going to save the world from our backyard, are you? I set my jaw. I'm not making videos for fun. There's real science in what I'm doing. Prashant cut in, mimicking my flat nasal voice. If we train neural networks on these rare peptide chains. Everyone burst out laughing, the way they do when it's at someone else's expense, but not cruel, not exactly, but it still felt like drowning in cement. Jules looked away, face tight. Afterwards, dishes and cake done, I slipped out onto the back steps, pressing my forehead to the cool brick. Sirens echoed distant down Parramatta Road as the first stars blinked through smog. The city felt massive, uncaring. I wanted to disappear into it or away from it, to some place where what I did made sense. I told myself I didn't care, that the laughter would bounce off me. But in truth, I heard their voices in every moment of weakness, every rejected grant, every year my wages barely covered my rent and textbooks. Every time my friends from uni pivoted to real jobs, consultancy or finance, and told me to stop tilting at windmills. But I stayed on at the research campus under the bridge, all glassy angles and gum trees, writing code that barely compiled, raising experimental yeast that died as soon as I left the incubator too long. For months, my inbox was a graveyard of "unfortunately, we will not be moving forward with your application," and my evenings ended with cold 2-minute noodles. All the while, the mocking chorus grew in my head, voices sharper in the dark. Sometimes, at night, I would stalk the halls of the nearly deserted labs, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and ask myself, am I the joke they say I am? Am I delusional? But those were the hours when the serenity crept in, strange as it was. When the city's traffic died and the CBD's glow flickered distantly outside the windows, the world shrank to just me, the only one foolish enough to believe in this idea. It was a stubborn piece, like a rock in a river. I'd stand at the bench over the tangle of wires and code printouts and remember why I'd started, sitting by Mum's hospital bed, the drip click whirring, when I first thought I could do something, anything, better. I poured myself into it. My experiments failed, then failed differently. A year slipped past. My supervisor, Professor Greer, called me into her office, an untidy cave papered with academic conference posters, and told me funding had dried up. You have passion, but at some point you have to be realistic. She shrugged, not cruel, just resigned. But if I could just... Liam, she said softly, it's not your fault. Maybe it's time for a more traditional path. I left the campus feeling both numb and alight with fury. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m. I brewed instant coffee, cracked open all the code I'd built, and went line by line. I stripped out every piece of jargon, cut every lazy shortcut, rebuilt the model from scratch, alone in my flat above the Thai takeaway with buses roaring beneath the window. I wrote to 50 labs in and out of Australia. 19 replied, 4 agreed to discuss it. 1 in Singapore said, prove it works and we'll listen. I spent my savings on reagents and borrowed old sequencing hardware from a PhD student who owed me a favor. It was the loneliest stretch of my life. Sydney's winter soaked every piece of clothing, the city grey as hands in dishwater. On video calls home, Mum would chirp, how's the not sure what to call it science stuff? You eating enough? I would smile, show her leftover stir-fry in the plastic tub. Dad never joined those calls. One bleary Saturday at dawn, I ran the model with a new batch of data from a rare childhood disorder, punching in sequence after sequence. The code stuttered, spat errors, froze, and then, finally, in the half-light creeping through my threadbare curtains, a pattern emerged. A new peptide interaction none of the published models had mapped. I triple-checked the results, shaking, barely breathing as I pieced together the significance. It took months to confirm, and more months to nurse the proof through the hardened arteries of academic bureaucracy. Sometimes I almost gave up. It seemed a doomed fight against invisible walls, but each setback sharpened my purpose, anger replaced by a focused calm. I learned to detach from the online mockery, from my family's doubts, from my own fearful voice. I published, I got notice. The Singaporean team took me in, and suddenly my world was labs where people had no baggage with me, only curiosity. We filed patents. Biotechs called, then hospitals, then the emails became phone calls and contracts and staff ID badges. I flew back and forth across the Pacific, conferences and adrenaline and quiet delirious exhaustion. 3 years passed. By the 4th, news reports blinked across social media of an immunotherapy, my model, now in trials, that had extended the life expectancy of dozens of rare disease patients, children and adults alike. Not just my therapy, of course, 100 hands molded it, but they interviewed me sometimes and a different clip went viral, me, now 28, at a lectern in neat suit jacket, speaking firm and clear. I heard from Jules first. Random text, the family are watching. I could almost see her, arms folded, rolling her eyes at our parents. I smiled at the phone and it felt like something healing inside me. The invitation came weeks later. Jules and her fiancé were hosting a barbecue at the old house in 5 Dock. Mum wanted me there, some cousins too, even Dad, she said. We're proud of you, for real. Come home. I almost didn't go. The serenity of this new life was hard won, what was left in Sydney for me besides memory and ridicule, but I was tired of running. Some brave, small part of me wanted to see them really see what I'd done. The city looked the same but different as I landed, a glittering tangle of steel and neon and memory. In a hired car, I cruised past the rows of jacarandas, old men hosing their lawns. As I walked up the driveway, arms loaded with wine and bakery sweets, nerves buzzed under my skin. The porch was crowded, Jules, taller now, tanned from Bondi, her fiancé Grant with his easy grin, my youngest cousins swaggering their teenage confidence, Mum fluttering at the barbecue like she could edit the scene just so. Jules saw me first. Her hug was brisk, strong, still got the dorky haircut, but her voice was thick with something else, pride maybe, or relief. Inside, the rooms were almost unchanged, old sports trophies gathering dust on shelves, faded photos of our mismatched family at wet beaches and Christmas mornings. Dad hovered by the fire pit, arms crossed. For a few moments he watched me like I might disappear, then quietly, your face was on the news, doctor now, are you? Not a doctor. But yeah, I guess you could say so, I answered, hands in pockets. I braced for the old jibe, the next wave of mockery. He just nodded, his jaw tight as if working through some stubborn piece of truth. Dinner passed with the same raucous laughter, but now there was a brittle edge, everyone aware something had changed, some boundary erased. There were jokes, sign my sausage roll, genius, but they landed differently, shaded less by disbelief and more by awkward pride. The pivotal moment came at dusk. Jules had arranged it with careful orchestration. She called for silence, waving her phone. "Reckon you lot should see this." She dragged a dining chair from the garage, propped her phone on a stack of books. On the small screen, the national broadcast played. Interview with a nurse, bright-eyed girl from Tasmania, talking about how the new AI-driven therapy had given her little brother extra months, maybe years, beyond his original prognosis. There were shots of hospital wards, families crying in relief. Then the reporter's voiceover, groundbreaking research led in part by Sydney-born scientist Liam Sharma, once written off as a crackpot in his own community. Sharma's initial work, mocked online, has changed the way rare diseases are treated worldwide. The camera cut to me, sharp suit and all, voice steady as I explained the science. Watching my own face, I felt suddenly outside myself, as if seeing a stranger. No one laughed. The only sound was the click of insects as the yard filled with shadows. My uncle cleared his throat. "You really did all that, mates?" I nodded, unsure what to say. Cousin Prashant, always the joker, shook his head. "Bloody hell, Liam, I used to think you were off your nut." Mum dabbed at her eyes. "We always knew he was special," she said, voice cracking. Jules glanced at me, smirking at the understatement. Dad looked at the screen, then at me. He didn't smile, not really, but he stuck out his hand, rough and calloused. "Proud of you, son, didn't see it coming. Guess I was wrong." I shook his hand, my own was shaking. The party lingered long after that moment, laughter settling into something gentler, conversations softer. The cousins grilled me for stories, not out of mockery but curiosity. Dad hovered at my side, talking low about his hopes for me, his regrets for not understanding earlier. In the pale blue hours between midnight and dawn, as the house slept and the city pulsed beyond, I stepped out to the darkened garden alone. The air carried the distant rush of traffic, mingled with the sweetness of jasmine and cold earth. I pressed my bare feet into wet grass and looked back at the house, its windows glowing soft, memories drifting through the old bricks. I remembered every cruel comment, every snide joke from people who thought they knew my limits. I remembered nights in empty labs, anger burning holes in my resolve, serenity whispering that none of it mattered if the science was true. Now, standing here, I felt both anger and serenity dissolving, making room for something new, a fullness. They had doubted, they had mocked, but I had done it, and now there was nothing left to prove. Yet this was home. My voice mattered here because it had survived here. The city was asleep, but somewhere hospitals were brighter, lives prolonged. I was no magic doctor, no wizard hacker, just someone too stubborn to quit. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight and lightness mingle in my chest, knowing I had come back not just to show them, but to show myself I belonged. And for the first time, I wanted to stay.